This story is about human impact of climate change, how we adapt to it, and the politics that is needed. Last year was the hottest year on record, and heat kills people. It is a silent, often unnoticed killer, and this makes it a politically even more difficult challenge. India's cities are particularly vulnerable to extreme heat, especially for nearly half the urban population who live in informal settlements. Here is Jaya in Bengaluru to tell us more.
This is Rajajinagar, an industrial estate in Bengaluru's urban core. As you can see, the activity is warming up. There's some construction happening in the background. Places like these are a mix of formal and informal workers, construction, traffic in the midst of the hustle-bustle of a big city. It doesn't look hot now, but when it's high summer and the temperature climbs, heat in this city, which was known to have a temperate and mild climate, becomes intense. And as record after record for heat waves around the world are broken, thanks to climate change, the problem is set to get worse. Here in Bangalore, we often get temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius, but over the last 5 years, we've had several instances of temperatures breaching 35 degrees Celsius, inducing heat stress, especially in vulnerable, sensitive and exposed populations. This year, the hottest day was over 37 degrees. That's almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit. When you think of climate change impacts, it's easy to think of disasters like hurricanes and cyclones, bushfires and rising sea levels. Heat that way is a silent killer, but compared to other extreme weather events, the impacts of heat and the deaths it causes are often hidden and hard to count, diminishing its political salience. The most authoritative figure on the issue suggests that at least 500,000 people die of heat every year, but we'll never know the true figures. What we do know is that a combination of ever higher temperatures and more of the world's population moving into urban areas like Bangalore mean the number of those affected will only go up. Heat affects poor people and low-income areas far worse than richer areas. For instance, research from WRI India shows that informal settlements in some Indian cities can be up to 6 degrees Celsius hotter than neighboring areas. The problem is that poor areas tend to become more crowded, with less space for air circulation. It's even worse in slums and informal settlements where building materials used are cheaper, less resistant to sun or rain, often amplifying the effects of ambient temperatures. As global temperatures rise, the need to deal with extreme heat is only getting urgent. And although heat waves in the developed world have also killed thousands, the burden will once again fall most heavily on the shoulders of the poor and vulnerable, especially in cities like Bengaluru. That is why heat is the fourth WRI Stories to Watch for 2024.
That was Jaya in Bengaluru, India's third biggest city and the tech capital with a population of 13 million people. The last two stories I've talked about focus on systems, investments, and policies. These are crucial. But this story is different. It's about human life, about people dying. Heat kills. More than 60,000 people are known to have been killed by Europe's summer heat wave in 2022. Worldwide, as Jaya just said, research suggests that there are more than 500,000 heat-related deaths a year. The real figure is doubtless far higher, as so many deaths from heat are by their nature often invisible. Heat also is more fatal for low-income and marginalized communities. Tornadoes, wildfires are far more dramatic, and you can see them in the strike. Politicians are much less likely to respond to a hidden killer that rarely captures the news headlines. If a problem goes unreported, it will likely continue unaddressed. So, what to watch for in heat this year? This is about lives, the voices and the rights of the poor and marginalized communities around the world, whether in India or in the United States. In the US, 1,700 people died from heat-related causes in 2022, and likely more last year. This is the US, one of the richest countries in the world, where 90% of people have access to cooling. In contrast, in Southeast Asia, only 15% of households had air conditioning in 2019. The elderly, outdoor workers, and people with no access to cool air are at greatest risk. The next thing to watch for in the story is how cities and local governments deal with this issue. Politics at this level tends to be more pragmatic and focus on solutions rather than ideology. And big cities are often ahead of national government. City leaders at this level of government are getting much needed attention from the climate community. At the Local Government Summit at COP28 last year, world leaders agreed to incorporate local government action into national climate commitments. This means grassroots and community groups and governments coming together, as they have done in Ahmedabad, India. Among other steps, they have planted trees, painted roofs white, and this has made a massive difference, especially for women who often work from their homes. Local action works best with good coordination between different levels of government. For instance, cities may not be able to influence building codes, while national governments can't really advance urban greening. Will national, provincial, and local governments coordinate action for maximum impact? Third, look for policies that encourage the use of design, alternative materials, and nature-based solutions to cool neighborhoods and cities. These solutions are often less politically controversial and do not increase energy use in its operations. As we heard from Jaya, choices about materials and structures can make a big difference in urban heat, and passive cooling can play a huge role. Allowing air to flow reduces temperature. In addition, nature-based solutions like planting trees can have a huge cooling impact. For example, in Medellin, Colombia, the city planted over 800,000 trees in green corridors, helping to reduce temperature in the city by 2 degrees. Even when air conditioning is used, higher efficiency in buildings and cooling technology can have a huge climate impact. Energy efficiency has the biggest mitigation potential per dollar spent. Watch how countries incorporate doubling energy efficiency, as they agreed in Dubai, and implement policies that encourage passive cooling and nature-based solutions in new climate plans. Lastly, we need to see a renewed emphasis on adaptation as the world gets steadily hotter. Yet, progress on the global goal of adaptation has been slow. Partly this is because solutions to adaptations are dependent on local condition. Watch how we advance the global goal for adaptation and whether the world makes much needed progress on financial commitments for locally led adaptation. Heat kills. This is an area where governments must lead, working with civil society and local communities. After all, if governments have one sacred duty, it is to protect the lives of its citizens. Yet around the world, thousands of people are dying from the impact of climate change. And this problem will only get worse as the world gets hotter. The poor and the marginalized communities suffer the most from impacts like heat. These are families that have little access to cooling and are forced to work outside in extreme heat to keep their families fed. These are the same people who did little to create this problem. Effective solutions exist, but they will only work if local governments work with communities to craft hyperlocal solutions, and national level governments work with cities to support these city-level actions, as we saw in Medellin. Richer countries that cause this additional heat and have benefited from centuries of fossil fuel use have a critical role to play. They must step up later this year to support vulnerable countries in adaptation investment. Choosing to act is a political decision, and so is choosing to ignore the problem.